Hi there, and I am Leslie, the founder and president of the Moxie Women's Foundation, and this is Linda Latender. Did I say that right?
You did, thank you.
Okay, so tonight we are going to talk about third-party sexual harassment and what you can do to deal with this in a service setting. And it's extremely unfortunate that this is something that we have to do tonight. But there's been an experience in downtown Saratoga Springs, New York, where there's been an uptick in sexual harassment from clients and customers that's just not okay. And what we had found was that the young girls that were experiencing this just really didn't know how to deal with it. You know, their job is customer service. It's to make sure that they are giving their customers a good experience. And you know, I even noticed that when they talked about it, they would kind of even shrink and make themselves small. So we're gonna talk a little bit about what we can do to stop this.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here to do this. I want people to know I'm not a professional.
Mm-hmm.
Retired social worker. My expertise in social work was working with people with developmental disabilities. But I've been a long-term customer and I hope friend of Saratoga Coffee Traders. I'm there a lot. In fact, I tell people, meet me at my office, and they know what that means. And so I just felt a real affinity for the young people that work there, the young women, and offered to give people some pointers on how to deal with it. And in fact, as women, we're socialized not to deal with it. We're socialized to be nice. Let's be nice. And so we're going to talk about the difference between being nice and being civil. So third-party sexual harassment. I didn't know that there was a term for it, but basically, third-party sexual harassment is sexual harassment in the workplace, but it's not committed by an employer, the owner of the business, or a supervisor. It's someone else. It's a customer, it's a vendor, it's a delivery person. So that's the third party from that. And there are three forms of it. It can be verbal, written, or physical. We alluded to this a bit. There's been a long history of women being second-class citizens and subjugation of women. We are often sexualized and objectified in the culture. It's gotten a bit better.
Yeah.
But if you look at, once in a while you'll come across some of these posts in social media. If you look at some of the ads from the 50s, 60s, and in the 70s. I mean, they've got half-naked women, they've got, so you can see what happens, you can see how women are portrayed. In fact, in the 70s, there was a song by Roberta Flack, Killing Us Softly, and that's about that. That they're not outright killing us, but they're giving tacit permission to disrespect us, to go out and rape us, to just objectify us and take away our humanity.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that rape culture, because I know when you and I sat down, you know, one of the points that we brought up was that, you know, if you are reading a headline about a rape happening, you're hearing about a woman who got raped. You're not hearing about the man who raped. And that's a problem as well.
Absolutely. You'll read the headlines, you know, 10,000 women were raped last year, not 10,000 men raped women. And why is it that we all know a woman that's been raped, but nobody knows a rapist?
Oh, that's a very good point, yeah.
Ever wonder about that? Yep. When I was in college, I remember going to workshops on how to protect ourselves from being raped. I don't remember one workshop on men teaching men not to rape and not to take advantage of women.
I do have to say, this year I saw some things circulating on social media that I was very happy to see, and one of them was, especially around the Halloween season, costumes do not equal consent, clothing does not equal consent. No. So, you know, we're starting to talk about it a little bit, but it's just not enough.
And it's interesting, is I'm old enough to remember back to 1974 when I was, I don't know, I think I was like 18 back then. And I remember when the Supreme Court decision had come down that women can now have credit cards in their own name. I remember when women could not have a credit card in their own name, they couldn't testify they were part of juries. So I remember when all of that changed, and that was thanks to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who You know, if she was Catholic, I'd be nominating her for a patron saint, and I might just do that anyway.
And this is what we call a patriarchy.
Right, the patriarchy, you couldn't get along. I remember that when that changed.
I can't even imagine. I
Yep.
was just before I was born, but you know, basically in my lifetime, just about in my lifetime. So I can't even imagine that.
Yes, well, I remember it, and I think as women, we need to tell our history, because I think there are a lot of women now
Her story?
her story, history, yeah, her story. We need to tell that, because we forget that that women, in order to get the right to vote, there were women that were hauled off to jail, there were women that were beaten in jail, there were women that were forced fed, there were women that died, just so that you and I could have the right to vote. And I remember, I have an aunt that's 105.
Yeah.
I love
Good
her
for
pieces.
her.
Oh yeah, she's been abolished. She's still alive. She's qualified. She remembers when women were able to vote. So yeah, she remembers that. So you don't have to be nice all the time. And here's why. And you know you've heard it. You should smile more. Don't you love that one? That's one of the great things about the pandemic and the mask. You don't hear that.
Yes,
You know? Yeah.
absolutely.
We are not put on the earth to entertain men or anybody else. And we've all had that teaching to be nice. And I have to tell you this story. Many years ago, early in my career, I was working at Unity House, and I was the assistant director of a home for people with mental illnesses. And myself and the director, the assistant director of the agency, Chris Burke, bless his heart, he and I went to another agency to it was sort of like a sharing thing. You know, we're going to share what we do, talk about the different procedures and how our houses are different or alike or whatever. So I walk in, and the guy there walks right past me, shakes Christopher's hand, how you doing? Pretty much ignores me. It was pretty brutal. It was so bad that when we got out in the car, Chris Burke looked at me and said, "I am so sorry. That man was he was just rude, it was awful," and he talked about how his wife was getting him to understand that women get treated like this all the time. And he says to me, "Thanks for being nice about it." And I was respectful, but I was too nice, and he was too nice. And an appropriate response to that would have been, "I refuse to be treated like this," and to leave. I mean, I wouldn't have to. And the difference between civil and not civil, you motherfucker, I'm out of here. You're not treating me like this. But you can be civil, but this isn't okay. I'm being treated like a second-class citizen, and I'm not going to stand for it. I'll see you later. Chris, I'll see you out in the car.
I can't begin to tell you how many times my husband says to me that so-and-so reached out to me and they want to know about Moxie Coffee, and I'm like, well, then why didn't they call Moxie Coffee?
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm right here.
Yeah, really. I'm a Quaker. We don't take our husbands' names by and large. And we were called Lucy Stoners. She was like one of the first people to do that. So I go by a different name than my husband. It doesn't, and I can tell you as a social worker, working 30 years, changing your name to your husband's name doesn't make you any more married. And it should be a choice. And if you're comfortable, absolutely. That's great. But that just wasn't comfortable. And there are some states now that are going to try to make it a law that you have to take your husband's name. Really? Oh yeah, and it was interesting when I did it. People were like, "Isn't it the law?" And people assume that it's the law that you have to do that, and you don't. It's your choice. So I really can't wait for some state to pull that stunt, because the Quakers will have them in court and they will lose, and it'll be very funny.
Interesting. Anyway. Not interesting.
Well,
sad,
but yeah. You know. Anyway. We get characterized differently. You've heard, if a man is assertive, he's a leader. If a woman's assertive, she's a bitch. If a man is promiscuous, he's a stud. If a woman is promiscuous, she's a slut. In fact, when I was doing an internship in Ogdensburg, when I was doing a clinical psych course up there, there were women that had been put in psychiatric wards because they were promiscuous.
Yeah, there was a movie that came out, and it was a little tongue-in-cheek humor, but it was called The Road to Wellsville, and it talked about Kellogg, who were treating women for certain mental illnesses, and it was from having sexual desires. And it's just, you know, the movie itself was sensationalized, but it was based in truth and fact.
Back in the
Hysteria.
Back in the 50s, and I think it probably went up into the 60s, if girls masturbated a lot, they circumcised them, which means they cut your clitoris off and you don't have sexual feelings anymore. I mean, well, you have the feelings, but you don't achieve orgasm. But they used to, it was a common thing to circumcise women. Yeah.
Insanity.
Interesting, mothers who focus on their career, and this still happens today. If you focus on your career, you're a bad mother. But the guy who stays home is somehow a hero. And you saw this again. Did you watch The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
I did not.
Oh, it's a fabulous, fabulous story about a woman who becomes a comedian, a stand-up comedian. It's in the 50s, and so that didn't happen very often then. But it's really, on a wider level, it's about a woman finding her own voice and finding who she wants to be in the world. Well, you read the stuff online about what a lousy mother Mrs. Maisel is. Because she's leaving her kids and going off her, it's like, it's not even about that. This is about her as her career in person. But to this, even in this day and time, you have people do, you know, there was a big discussion about she's a lousy mother. Well,
yeah, because we need more mom guilt, because, you know, we don't face it every single day just all on our own. We need that public shaming.
Yeah.
To be completely conflicted about what we should be doing right now. Standing here, addressing everybody about sexual harassment, or being in the other room putting my baby to bed.
Yeah.
You know, these are the choices that we have to make every day.
Well, and you should try being a woman making a choice not to have kids. It's, you fight with that. It was a conscious choice for me for a lot of reasons, but I had to put up with a lot of crap. First of all, it's not anybody's business.
Absolutely.
But I really, and we really do push that on people. And as a social worker, I can look back and say, there are people I know that should not have had kids. And I'm not talking, you know, and people immediately think, oh, some, you know, homeless drug addict in an alley. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about middle and upper class people that really didn't understand what they were getting into, didn't have the skills to do it, and shouldn't have had kids. The appropriate response when somebody says to you, I don't want to have kids, is not to say, oh, you'll change your mind, which is what I heard a lot of.
Yeah.
But the appropriate response is, if you don't, then make sure you don't have any, because you can't put them back once you have them.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of big time and commitment, and if you feel like you don't, if you have any doubts, don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Don't do it. Yep. There's a challenge in the service industry to make sure that a customer is treated well, and this is where it gets a little tricky and enjoys their experience with the business that you're serving, but you don't need to sacrifice your dignity, comfort, or control to accomplish this. You can do this in a way, you can stand up for yourself in a way that's civil but direct.
Absolutely. And it is very important that your supervisors, your company owners, the people who are in charge there are going to be behind you 110%, because there needs to be some understanding across the board that this is not okay, this is not going to be tolerated. You know, and in part of that, if you take a look on the website later on today, moxiewomen'sfoundation.com, or not today, probably tomorrow, we're going to have a PDF version of a sign that says, grab this.
Oh, yes. Good sign.
Please note, this establishment proudly stands with our staff against third-party harassment. Management reserves the right to refuse service to any person who harasses the staff. This is including but not limited to unwanted sexual advances, unwanted verbal or physical behavior, unwanted contact outside of the workplace. So these are going to be available for you to download so that they can be posted prominently at your place of work. If you can't download it, reach out to me, moxiewomen'sfoundation@gmail.com, and I'll make sure you get a copy.
You have some great stats that people might be interested to sort of put a framework around the problem here at the bottom.
Yep. You want me to read those?
Yeah, take a
Okay.
look.
So 78% of women and 55% of men reported sexual harassment by customers. 50% women and 40% men and 60% trans workers characterized the behavior as scary or unwanted. 30% of women, 22% of men, and 40% of transgender workers said inappropriate touching was a common occurrence. This is just not okay. And if you're not aware of what happened at Saratoga Coffee Traders, you know, the experience that happened there was, one of the first things that was brought to our attention was there was like a 40-year-old man who was private messaging a 14-year-old girl on Instagram or something like that. It was seemingly benign, but that behavior is just creepy. We had somebody else who was sending emails. There was somebody else that was harassing a girl about their boyfriend, and who this customer thought was or wasn't appropriate for this girl to be dating. And it was done in such a way that this girl was obviously upset with the interaction, and the interaction didn't stop and continued during multiple visits to the coffee shop. So this is the type of stuff that we're talking about. Emails being sent, outside of the workplace. It doesn't have to happen right in front of you. It could be, 4 days after your shift. It's still not okay.
And if you tell them it's not okay and they still do it, that becomes a crime. It's called stalking. So part of what we're trying to help people do here is change the paradigm and change the way, kind of retrain you, because we're enculturated, we're taught to be that passive, nice woman or girl. Mm-hmm. And part of what we're trying to do is give you permission to be assertive and the tools to be assertive. There's this great, we couldn't put it up on here, first of all, I'm not a techno person. If you do an internet search on waitress flipping a man, there's this great video, and I'm a Quaker, I shouldn't be saying this because I'm supposed to be doing the nonviolence thing, but I gotta tell you, this is more of the cockles of my heart. Having been a cocktail waitress where people thought you immediately think you're a prostitute, and I have also been sexually assaulted more than once. So if you Google this, if you do an internet search and you get, this woman she's walking by, it's the waitress, she's walking by, the guy grabs her butt, she turns around and flips him over onto the floor. Doesn't expect that. And part of what we need to do is change their expectation, because if every guy knew that he was either going to get flipped on the floor or called out loud and clear in front of everybody, you cut down on a lot.
Absolutely, and I think, we're starting here with calling people out on it.
Yes.
And that's exactly where it starts. And one of the things, like I said, I noticed that when you're feeling unconfident, you shrink in on yourselves. I physically watch women try to get smaller when they're in those types of situations, and what you need to do, and we're not necessarily talking about flipping somebody, like physically touching them. We're talking more about the paralinguistic cues that we're talking about.
I'll explain. That's just such a beautiful thing to watch. I wouldn't recommend getting physical because most of us aren't that big. Yeah. But this woman managed to flip this guy over. Dollars to donuts, he doesn't do that again.
Yeah.
So being assertive in you can make yourself look bigger.
Yep. Stand up straight, square your shoulders, and make direct eye contact.
Absolutely. Those are part of the paralinguistic cues, and you know what the paralinguistic cues are. You just don't know that you know. Yep. Those are the parts of speech that give speech meaning. For example, I'm going to use the same words, but I'm going to say two different things. That hair looks great. That hair looks great. I said the same, I used the exact same words, but I said two different things.
Absolutely.
And I like the second one, by the way. I'm for the second one. So that's the point is, it's the cadence you use, it's the tone of voice, it's the volume of voice, it's how you hold yourself, it's eye contact, it's the words you enunciate more clearly than others. What's the word I want? It's a musical word, and I can't think of it. Anyway, you might. Yeah.
What you're searching for.
I'm getting old. Anyway, no, but it's the one that you might pay more attention to, the one that you give more power
Emphasis.
to. Yay! Thank you. That's the word I wanted. Thank you. Emphasis. The way you emphasize the words.
And this is going to be easier for some people than others. For some people, it comes completely naturally. But we're really speaking to the people who this doesn't come so naturally for. Mm-hmm. This is where you're going to have to dig a little deeper, find your inner moxie, and you square your shoulders, you make yourself a little bit bigger, and you make direct eye contact, and you say exactly what it is that you mean to say. and you drop some of those things that we've been so taught to be so nice and so polite. You don't have to say, thank you, I'm not interested. You just say, I'm not interested.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, but
Try not to say
I'm
that.
not interested.
Right. And you know, as women, one of the things we're always trying to gauge is how safe are we?
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a bar and some guy hits on you and you're kind of looking around and you're just kind of like, you know, who's here to protect me? Is this guy going to get by? And some of that you have to gauge a little bit with people. But again, the paralinguistic cues, be civil. You don't have to do a character assassination with the person, but be civil, but be clear and be direct. I'm not interested. Some older guy's hitting on you. You are old enough to be my father. This is creepy. Stop it. And you're not, listen, you fat ass, or you know, whatever. You're not doing a character assassination, but you're being very clear about this needs to stop. I don't like it.
And you can still deliver very good customer service, because we are going to encounter one of two things once you've done that. You're either going to be faced with someone who really didn't mean anything by it, and they're going to be taken aback, and they're going to just continue on with their transaction as they would anyway. If you're faced with somebody that is an actual predator, and make no mistake, these people are predators, and they are expecting you to act like prey. Prey makes themselves smaller. Prey hides. Prey gets weak. You've got to stand up straight. You are absolutely right to stop that behavior, and you do not need to feel bad. You do not need to say thank you. You do not need to say I'm sorry, but you do not need to say I'm flattered, but you are better off stopping it right in the beginning. I am not interested. This is not okay.
You can also, and there might be a time where a little bit of humor might help. Some guy asks you out, you're on the counter, can my husband come? Can my boyfriend come? I mean, some of this is the art of living and gauging what's happening. And I want to just stop for a minute. If you feel like you're in danger, you ever have that feeling like, you know, I just can't put my finger on it, but something in your gut?
Yeah.
Pay attention to your gut, because what your gut is tuning into is all of those paralinguistic cue things we just talked about. We aren't really taught what those are, and but we all know what they are. You know,
Maybe we can. Maybe do we have a moment? It's not in our syllabus, but maybe we can talk about some of the paralinguistic cues that you're going to see from somebody who is predatory.
They're going to be leaning in on you. Hey, buddy, my eyes are up here. You know, leaning in, getting into your space, talking down to you. Those would be some things like that. Creepy behavior, and that's not always good to define, but just sort of feel like he's undressing you with his eyes. That can be hard to describe, but if you feel it, it's there. Pay attention to your gut, is what I'm saying to you.
Absolutely.
And that figures in later. If you think, and we'll get to that later, if you think that this person is not safe, we can tell you some things, we'll give you some cues, some things to do with that. It's very helpful to redirect. Is there anything else I can get you? You know, the guy asks you, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Would you like some cream with that coffee? Or would you like, you know, I don't know, what's it called, an upsell? Would you like a muffin with your coffee?
And when I was
Redirect
working
that.
with people with disabilities, we often called that planned ignoring. Like, you are just not even going to acknowledge that those words just came out of that person's mouth, and you redirect them with anything that's going to take their attention off of whatever it was that they just said to you. And if you have a setup where this works, if you can physically redirect them, that's even better. Get them out of your space, move them along the line. You can pick up your coffee, your donut, whatever, down there, move them along as quickly as you can.
And if it can be that you have somebody else wait on this person.
Yep.
You know, if they're really creeping you out, that sends them at one of your, if you can't always do that as a coworker. You can't always do that, but you can have somebody else wait on them. You were going to talk about tips.
Yeah,
That's kind of important.
I spent 19 years on and off in the service industry, waitressing, bartending, and I saw a lot of times, I mean, even when I was tattooing and things like that, where, God, even in real estate, I don't even know, who am I kidding? Where, you know, men seem to think that they can buy you, and that by over tipping and you know, putting a huge wad of cash down on the bar makes it okay for them to interact with you and behave with you in this way. And it absolutely is not. It's their choice. If they want to slip you $100 to pour a cup of coffee, that's their choice. You owe them absolutely nothing more than whatever your job title is. And you don't feel bad about it. I mean, clearly define where your boundaries are. If they choose to put money down and throw money at you, have a nice drink on them at their expense and laugh all the way
All the way back. Right, amen.
You know,
Amen.
but it is all too often, and especially when I was younger, you see that money come out, especially if you really need money. It's hard, it's difficult, it puts you in such an awkward situation, but let me tell you, I am 42 years old right now, and I wish that I had known this. I wish somebody had beat it into my head that I didn't have to stay and engage in that super awkward, awful conversation for as long as I did, as many times as I did. That was just so painful to me, just because somebody was tipping me and I felt like I needed to do it. I felt like, you know, if I don't let this guy continue to spend this money, my boss is going to be mad because, you know, that's what we're in the business for, and I'm behind the bar, and I'm supposed to be selling this establishment, and I'm supposed to be the reason that they want to come in here. And that is absolutely the case. You're a bartender. Your tips and your money are dependent on you being engaging. Absolutely. Engage in good conversation. Engage in healthy conversation. You know, shut down and create boundaries around any conversation and interaction that is going to make you uncomfortable, no matter how much money it means you're going to lose. Because as my husband sees, 9 times out of 10, especially if your establishment backs you up on this, you're not going to find that you're losing money on this. You're going to have more people that are willing to come and spend money at your establishment because you're a good establishment than you are to just let it go, because nobody's going to be talking about the bad things that are happening, really. You know, you might have some staff that whispers at the end of the night, but you're not going to have somebody going on a Yelp review going, oh man, I was at this bar the other day and this guy was hitting on the waitress and nobody did anything about it. But I will tell you, if you have a policy where you're not going to accept this type of behavior, people are going to pay attention and they're going to share those posts and they're going to talk more about it, and it's actually going to be better for the establishment than it is to just ignore it.
And I think the paradigm is changing, especially with the Me Too movement. I will go to a place that I know is taking care of their, and having been in the service industry, if I think somebody's abusing their life, I won't go there. But I think it has begun to change. So that
it is. The change is small.
We have to make it change.
I feel like the Me Too movement needs to come back, but it needs to be taken more seriously, and it's on here, somewhere on here. There you go. Me Too.
Me too. And it's one of the things that we don't have listed that we should have, but like I said, we're not professionals. It's the first time. Customers giving you a hard time, you need to tell your boss. You need to tell your supervisor.
Absolutely.
You need to keep track of those kinds of things. And again, it's that somebody's giving you the creeps and you can't put your finger on it. Yes, you can. But that's your guts. You may not be able to name it all, but that's your pay attention to your guts, because that's all of those paralinguistic cues and the accumulated life experience that you have.
Yep. Another thing to know is that any form of unwanted touch crosses the line into a criminal action that can result in the arrest of the perpetrator. You don't have to tolerate that. It is not acceptable. And like you said earlier, any form of unwanted contact after it's been established that you don't want that contact is stalking. So you do have rights. You need to know your rights, and it's your body, your choice.
And what do you think would happen if every woman, every time we had been grabbed or touched, get your hands off of me?
Yeah.
You know, if men were going to, if the culture of men knew that that's what was going to happen, you can bet it wouldn't happen as often.
Well, what happens most often? I mean, most often what I saw, somebody touches you, you just, you know, subtly kind of move away. You know, no big movements, no big stop, but just kind of.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I'm come across as a very strong woman, but I sort of got myself out, and now I wish I turned and said, get your hands off of me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think, and the sexual harassment, these predators, they know no bounds. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you some of the horrible, awful situations that I found myself in over the years, but it's certainly not every man, customer, whatever. I'll never forget, I started bartending when I was 19 years old, believe it or not. I couldn't even drink. It was, well, I took the job as a waitress and I showed up and they're like, we need a bartender. Here's how you pour a beer, there's the bottles, count to 3. And here I go, I was a bartender. It was great. I was in the middle of nowhere.
We had a lot of fun doing that, by the way.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I had a good time with a lot of my customers as a cocktail waitress. There were just a couple that were.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you know, what ended up happening was I got scheduled mostly on like Sunday afternoons, Tuesday afternoons. I wasn't being given like Friday, Saturday night bar shifts. I would be put on the floor to waitress on those nights, but never behind the bar. And when I finally asked my manager why that was, he was like, I can't really do my job if you're behind the bar with me because I have to look out for you too much. And he's like, it's just too much for me to juggle. I'd rather just run the bar by myself. And you know, there were a couple of occasions where I did have to work behind the bar. And I'll never forget, there was this guy who did exactly what you described. I was bartending and I just, you know, not because I'm little and the bar came up to here on me. So I just nonchalantly rested my hands while we were talking. I actually used to work with him, so I felt safe talking to him. But we worked in a nursing home setting and now here we are at a bar. And don't you know, he reaches over and grabs my hand. And my manager, who was, you know, the same age as I was, a gentleman, young kid at that point, I mean, I think he was 21 and I was 19. You know, he looked at me and he was like, don't serve him anymore, just switch sides, just don't even ignore him, or don't even bother with him, I've got him. And then we had a couple of other guys, because on the slower weeknights, I would work by myself and I would close. Now this bar is in the middle of nowhere. You cannot see neighbors. There is nobody's gonna hear me screaming. So these locals kind of banded together and they called themselves the Closers Club. And one of them would always stay with me until I closed and they would wait in the parking lot. And when I would come out, they would walk me to my car to make sure that I got there safe. So, you know, there are some really fantastic people out there. But you really have to seek them out, and it's really important to know who your allies are when you're in that situation, especially if you're working alone.
And I know this would, I can't speak for every city, but I know in Saratoga Springs, if you were closing up and you were afraid to walk out to the car by yourself, you'd had an interaction with a customer, and you'd call the police to come give you an escort out to the car. I know they would do that.
Yeah, and I, you know, like Broadway, Saratoga Springs, most of the business owners know each other. And I know that my husband has had conversations with, you know, the boutique next door. If your girls are there closing alone, I've got, you know, guys closing tonight, just, you know, let us know that you want them to walk you out. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Another good tip is if you have to close on your own, you have to walk out to your car and there is nobody around physically to walk with you, get a friend or somebody, family on the phone and talk with them the whole way that you get out there. Make sure that they're on speaker so everybody around you knows that you're actually on the phone with somebody because they're not going to bother you.
And when you're walking out, you walk out, you look like you mean business. Rapists and assaulters will look for a woman that looks meek and shy. Like, you know, you need to walk out there and look like you own the world. And walk out and, you know, shoulders back, standing up, walking like you mean it. Have your car keys in your hand. I always, when I'm out at night, I try to park under a light.
Yep.
So those are just a couple. You know, sometimes ask a guy, you're going someplace at night and you have to park in the parking lot, what do you do? And then you ask women that. And now, well, I look for a light, I try to park under a light near the door, you know, we really are socialized very different. But those are good safety measures, regardless, because we haven't changed the world yet.
And you know, I saw a TikTok the other day, because you gotta love TikTok, and this guy was leaving a gym late at night, and he realized that somebody had, you know, a woman had left just ahead of him, and she kept looking over his shoulder, and so he looked over his shoulder, and he realized, oh, she's afraid of me. And so he kind of backed off and slowed down and walked to his car, but as it turned out, he was parked right next to her. And at the end of it, he was like, I didn't know what to do. He's like, I was so hurt to think that she would be that afraid of me, but it was absolutely eye-opening to realize that this is what women go through every day, and they think about that, you know, anybody could be a predator, anybody could be a problem. And it was just really interesting to see, you know, how sincere he was in this video about, you know, how hurt he was and how surprised. Why are we surprised by this? I mean,
we often think of these people who are the assaulters and the rapists as, you know, they're wearing dirty baggy pants, they probably peed themselves and they haven't shaved in a few days. Nope.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Nope. They're wearing ties, they're wearing suits, they're clean shaven, they look like the all-American guy. So you can't tell by looking. One of the things that you mentioned was a really good idea, and that's building that sense of a safety community. When Scott talked to the people next door about closing late, you know, let us know, we'll walk out, we'll walk together. You can do that if there's, not if you're out in the middle of nowhere,
yeah.
But you know, businesses around you, you can go in and introduce yourself. Hi, I work next door, we're gonna be closing late tonight, can we walk out together? Build a sense of community. And again, if you're really frightened and there's no one around, you can call the police. You could call a family member or a friend. Listen, there was a real creepy guy in here. I'm out in the parking lot, it's dark, can you come walk with me?
And
don't be afraid to do that. Better to do that than to be in a dangerous situation.
And bring it to the attention of your employer.
Absolutely.
Your employer may not realize that this is a situation that makes you uncomfortable, and they might be able to do some extra safety measures for you, or at least say, you know, let you know that maybe there's a camera somewhere that you didn't realize there was. So, you know, not that a camera's going to prevent anything.
No, they're less likely these days.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, but absolutely, let your employer know that you're uncomfortable, and see if you can't mutually come up with a solution for it.
Absolutely. Some of the things to set up some safety things from the first, set boundaries right from the start. Don't give out personal information about where you live. You know, you might talk about your dog, you know, because I know you have to make, make conversation with your customers, and you want them to have a pleasant experience. And you want to be friendly, but be careful about the kind of personal information that you give out.
Absolutely. And do not accept gifts. Tips are not gifts. Tips are tips, but do not accept gifts.
Yes, absolutely. Don't accept gifts. And what you said, you owe them nothing but to do your job, no matter how much they tip you. That's their choice. They're not buying you with the tip. That's your wages.
Absolutely.
For a good job done. And we did say, do not give out personal information. Be very careful, or be very careful about the kind of personal information that you give out. You know, my favorite team is the Yankees. I have a dog, and I make, you know, great chocolate chip cookies. I don't know that I, you know, give anything beyond anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, even that at some point, you know,
I might not want to. Yeah.
They can find the car in the parking lot that has the dog sticker,
Yeah,
and Yankee sticker, and sweet treats.
Yeah, you want to be careful on, and again, it's a judgment call of being careful. You want to have fun with your customers. You do want to have a good time with them.
And you just taking from one of the experiences, or a couple of the experiences, and actually most of the experiences that I talked about, these were regular customers. These were people that had come in for over long periods of time, and for a very long time, the relationship and the dynamic was safe and it was okay. So I think that you can get comfortable, and you know, if we're talking about a predator that's going to, you know, lay in wait, if at any point in time that relationship and dynamic changes, that dynamic changes. It changes for you and it changes for them. And it's unfortunate that, you know, so-and-so's been coming in here forever and they've always been nice. Yes, they had always been nice, and now they're not. And so now maybe you've chatted, you know, with them extensively over the last year, but now your conversations need to be cut short to, what are you having? Here you go. See you later. Bye-bye. You know, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes. It really, you know, and I keep saying these things and I keep reiterating them, you know, and I know it's a little bit redundant, but I think that we just need to be reminded. We need to be reminded constantly that we aren't owing people anything, because it is absolutely ingrained in us for so long to smile, be nice, and and all of that, that you really need to hear over and over and over again, that you don't owe them anything, that this isn't okay, that you deserve to set those boundaries, that it's
Absolutely.
okay to set those boundaries, that by creating those boundaries, you're not being a bitch, you're literally just protecting yourself.
Absolutely. It's one thing to smile and welcome your customers, and, oh, I'm really glad to see you, how was your vacation, you know, all that kind of welcome your customers. It's another thing when somebody's trying to hit on you, you don't have to be nice. Be civil and be clear. And they may call you names, they call you a bitch, that doesn't make you a bitch. And any more than if I went and stood out in the garage that it made me a car.
I like that.
Well, it's, you know, we get those labels and we take them to heart. It's not. That's his problem. You're assertive. There's a difference.
Yep. And it's, you know, it's all a matter of just language. There's nothing wrong with smiling and just ignoring it and just letting it go and saying, how would you like your coffee? And if that doesn't work, then you have to change your tone.
Absolutely. And remember, the assertive, looking bigger, speaking directly and clearly, making eye contact, not using I'm sorry and thank you and whatever that, this isn't okay. You're creeping me out. My favorite, you're old enough to, with some of these older guys hitting on these younger women, it's like, you are old enough to be my father. This isn't okay. That usually will stop it.
Yeah.
When they get reminded.
Embarrass them.
Yeah, embarrass them. Well, you know, and some of that needs to happen. I think if we begin to change the paradigm and how we react to this stuff, it'll change. It starts with one person. It starts with us, and we move it out.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's about it.
thank you.
Thank you. So this video is going to forever be here on this Moxie Women's Foundation YouTube channel, but we're also going to upload it to the MoxieWomen'sFoundation.com events page, MOXXI. We're going to have the video, a PDF outline that
This will be on the website?
Yep.
Yes,
There's
good,
gonna be
wonderful. You can download it?
Yep, downloadable PDF for this outline, and also downloadable PDFs of the sign that we read off. I really encourage people to print these off, call me, email me, I'll send them to you. But we really need to make sure that as a community, as a society, that we're banding together and saying, there's a zero tolerance policy for harassing our staff in any way. I would love to see these posted in every single business across the nation, because it just needs to be. There's no reason not to. There is no reason not to look at your clients and your vendors and everybody and say, you are not allowed to do this in my establishment, and I will ask you to leave if that is the case. So these will be available for a PDF download. Email me, MoxieWomen'sFoundation.com. Give us a call, 518-226-5982. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
You bet. My pleasure. God bless.
Oh, that was the wrong one.